Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another fire episode of the What Now podcast. I'm back, Spencer. We got Zach in his branded shirt. Y'all can't see it, but
Branded shirt.
that's right.
Branded
He's getting
shirt.
real, being professional. And then we got the one, the only, the man himself, Dr. Matt Morris of Pinnacle Chiropractic in Sarasota.
In the
What's up, bro?
house. In the house.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on. I don't know if I'm the only Matt Morris out there. There might be quite a few of us, but
You're the only one doing what you're doing, so that's what matters. But So, guys, we wanted to bring Matt back on. If you didn't know, we had him on in the podcast early days, and this is why we switched to recording to Zoom because something happened with his video, and so it's just lost in the depths. It's like one of those unlisted, never produced episodes. But we got him back because Matt has probably single-handedly been the biggest catalyst for Zach and I's growth, and so we wanted to bring him on so you guys can have him in your ears and you can learn all the things that we've learned from him, so you can accelerate your growth as well. And so today we'll be talking about Matt's story. We'll be talking a little bit about being coachable and what that means, and maybe drop you a couple gems along the way.
So without further ado, Matt, let's get into it, huh?
sounds good.
So to catch our listeners up to speed, Spencer and I know your story of going from upper cervical doc to pediatric doc, but talk through making that transition. What were the hardships in that? What did that look like from a mindset and those type of things?
Yeah, so when I was going through chiropractic school, I went to Palmer Davenport. I'm a Midwest boy, grew up in Rockford, Illinois area. And when I was going through school, I got interested in upper cervical chiropractic. A lot of, being a member of Delta Sigma Chi, along with you guys, the Alpha chapter at Palmer Davenport had a big upper cervical influence. So kind of, uh, got into that lane through some upperclassmen fraternity brothers that were interested in NUCA upper cervical. Started getting adjusted that way in school, and that's the route that I thought that I wanted to go. So did my internship at two different upper cervical NUCA offices, one in White Plains, and then one in my hometown of Rockford, Illinois. And so after graduating chiropractic school, I knew that I wanted to live in Sarasota, Florida. My family grew up. I grew up vacationing down here with my family and just loved the beach lifestyle, as Spencer got to experience this last weekend. But I always knew after graduating school, this is where I wanted to be, where I wanted to open up. So made the move here, but opened up upper cervical. So I opened up in 2015, the beginning of 2015, and did upper cervical NUCA, had the x-ray equipment and everything, and did that for probably a good 2 years. And, was kind of struggling. I was struggling to find my purpose. I wasn't super passionate about it is what I came to realize. So a couple years in, basically, I had this big kind of I guess you could say big kind of fork in the road in my life that I was like, okay, I know upper cervical isn't the direction that I want to go. Where am I supposed to go? And I was actually considering leaving chiropractic at the time, possibly going back to get my MBA. I was always interested in the business side of things. And I just knew I had to make some change. So at that time, one of my friends that I went to school with, Dr. Andy Camerman, he practices in Omaha, Nebraska. He told me that he was starting to see pediatrics and was training under Dr. Tony Ebel at Epic Pediatrics at the time with Dr. David Jackson. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to give chiropractic another shot. Like I felt like I was meant to be a chiropractor. I felt like this was the direction God was leading me in my life. So kind of made that jump and started learning more about pediatrics and stuff. And around this time, my wife and I were expecting our first child, so she was pregnant with our daughter, and so I just started to dive in, learn as much as I could about pediatric chiropractic care, and especially nervous system based chiropractic care. I got exposed to that in school, being a member of Delta Sigma Chi. Luckily, I was exposed to the principle of chiropractic and the nervous system and true chiropractic and the power of it. So I always knew, the power of pediatrics, and make an impact in kids' lives. So I started to see some of the moms that I was taking care of upper cervically. I started to see their kids. I was basically like, hey, bring your kids in for free. I don't think I would recommend that now, seeing anybody for free, but I needed to get my hands on kids and kind of practice what I was learning. And one of my first cool cases was a mom was coming to me, and she brought her son to me, that was getting sick all the time, a lot of chronic ear, nose, throat stuff. He was a little bit delayed speech wise. And a month or two into care, like his vocabulary and speech was exploding. He was no longer getting sick all the time with that chronic congestion. And that was the first time I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Then I really started to shift all my marketing towards kids at that time, was starting to go in that direction. So I started doing a lot of perfect storm workshops. That was one of the big things Dr. Tony was talking about, and that was a good practice builder for me. That's how I built a lot of my pediatric practice in the beginning, was doing those workshops. And my future office manager, she came to one of those workshops with in regards to her daughter with sensory processing disorder, and started care with her. Her daughter was basically having a lot of struggle with emotional control and regulating her emotions, especially after school. She would do a good job of holding it together at school, but as soon as they got home, in the car line, she would just lose it. And it was meltdown after meltdown after meltdown, all the way until going to bed. So their life was a struggle. They couldn't go on vacations as a family. And a couple months into care, I remember her mom, Jen, writing me an email just saying what a gift and a blessing this was to their family. They went on vacation for the first time to Orlando, to Disney World, and Avery was able to have a fine time without getting overwhelmed sensory wise or having the meltdowns or anything like that. And that was really the defining case in my pediatric career, that I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the impact and the power that I'm able to make. And so then after that, I basically decided to hire her mom, because she was already telling all of her friends, and it just made the most sense to hire a mom that's already super passionate, knows the power of chiropractic and what it can do for a child. And we just really blew up the practice after that. And then it just, steadily has grown. It's been a little over 6 years, 6.5 years now since I went the pediatric route, and just am blessed to see the office growth. We just hired our third associate doctor in 2024. We'll be hiring our fourth associate doctor. And so just been amazing to see kind of the growth that happened once I was able to find my passion in chiropractic and my calling of the direction that I was really supposed to go in. So that's a little bit about kind of my story, my journey from upper cervical to the pediatric world of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can unpack just from that story. And it's, I mean, not to use one of the groups you were part of, but that's a pretty epic story, right? Getting to hear that testimony and really utilizing kind of that hero's journey, that you hear from people like Donald Miller and Russell Brunson, where, you have that one story in the back of your head, and now you got to burn the boats, and like, this is what I got to do. And that lit that fire inside of you. But no, that was really cool to hear.
I think one of the threads that I really want to pull on from that story is your switch from NUCA into pediatrics, because I feel like a lot of students, especially since our podcast is geared to like the students just coming right out of school, I feel like a lot of students are under care in a certain way in school, and they follow certain people who are really awesome students in school, like really awesome upperclassmen who do like really awesome stuff. And then when they get out of practice, they want to say like, oh, I want to be just like this person was in school. And then they fumble around in practice all the time, is because like, it's not really their passion. They're like chasing this thing. Like, I know for me, I was like super into like zone and like energy healing and like concept therapy and all of that stuff. And I was really into all of like the woo-woo, like crazy stuff. And I thought that's what I want my practice to be. And when I opened up, I like was 2 weeks in, and I was like, I'm miserable. Like, this is not fun. This is an energy drain. And one of the the things that like echoed in my mind was like one of our other bros in the fraternity, Brian Asby, who I know you went to school with, you're good friends with. He told me, man, months before I had opened up, like, dude, if you don't see kids, you're missing your calling, because you're like 100% a kids doc. And that just like rang in my ears. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start seeing kids. And that's pretty much where I found my passion too. So what is some of your advice, Matt, as somebody who kind of went through that transition to students, in terms of like how to find their passion, especially like in chiropractic?
Yeah, I think for students, one thing that I wish, looking back at my journey as a student, I wish I would have done is I kind of like got locked into one thing right away. And so it was kind of like the first thing that kind of caught my eye, and, upperclassmen kind of teaching me things that I wish what I would have done differently is experience all the different things out there, it kind of go to the different clubs, the different technique clubs, go to the pediatric clubs, go to the upper cervical clubs, go to the network tonal clubs, like experience them all and see, what resonates the most with you. When you get hyper focused and you just go after the first thing that you're exposed to, that's when it can lead to that incongruency or unfulfillment as you get into practice, because you literally just chose the first thing that you got exposed to and then followed that without seeing the grand scope of all the different things within chiropractic, or the different, I guess, routes or avenues you can take within chiropractic. So if I was a student and going through that process again, I would just get exposed to as many different things as possible, and then visiting as many different offices as possible as well. If I was a student, I would have visited all different types of offices, and that would have allowed me to get a feel for, all the different types of offices. As I'm sure you guys know, like every office is a little bit different with their feel and energy, even within, chiropractic or pediatrics, or a subspecialty within chiropractic. So visiting as many different types of offices as a student would be super helpful as well. So just expose yourself to as many different things as you can within chiropractic school, because that's really going to help you kind of feel out what makes the most sense and what is going to be the most passionate route for you to go, instead of, like I said, my route of just getting locked into the first thing that I got exposed to, and then that leading to unfulfillment once I got into practice and realizing, actually, this isn't what I want to do, and what I'm not that's not what I'm supposed to be doing with my life.
In terms of like finding your passion, because I know in school, whenever you like start talking about, especially if you dive in the business world, everybody's like, you got to find your ideal client. You got to find your ideal client. And I think you can kind of rephrase that, like when your ideal client finds you, right? Like you'll know. Can you talk a little bit about like what did it feel like in terms of like your energy in practice whenever you made that switch from upper cervical NUCA to pediatrics? Like, how do you know when you really found your spot? Because we can get exposed to all of those things. That's awesome. But then, what if we're left with like the whole analysis paralysis feeling, right? That can feel just as incongruent as getting locked into one thing as trying to be locked into everything. So what was it like for you to make that when you knew?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing was, putting it into practice and just seeing the results. The results from the patients that I was taking care of was basically the reassurance for me that this was the route that I was supposed to be taking, that I was supposed to be going. So from an upper cervical standpoint, like I didn't get the same feeling of fulfillment from people, with migraines or with these pain conditions. For me, it was like I needed to see something internally happen, internally change. And I think for kids, like that's, the majority of them are coming in, they're not coming in with pain issues. So for me, it was the results that I was able to see and firsthand seeing the power of the adjustment. I feel like as students, we're told all these stories from all these chiropractors, but a lot of times we haven't seen it ourselves. And so being able to see the power of chiropractic and what really can happen in a child was really what kind of was the, I guess, defining moment that I knew, okay, this is the direction for me.
And I think too, once you find that direction, I know something I struggle with, especially, I mean, being as I talk to both of y'all quite a bit, right? Like Matt, you're my coach, Spencer, we record a podcast together. And then like both of y'all are great pediatric chiropractors, and I'm kind of the back pain headache guy. And there's sometimes that voice in the back of my head. And I know students and even I'm sure docs that, you know, when you're in that circle, you start to care a lot about what your peers think. And so was there any, you know, especially in those couple early years where you had to overcome that thought or that consciousness of what are my friends in the upper cervical world going to think when I go to the pediatric realm?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's, I think, human nature to think that like you're abandoning this thing that you poured all this energy into, you know, going to the NUCA conferences, some of my mentors in upper cervical, you know, the back of your mind, you're like, what are they going to think of me? Like leaving the upper cervical world and going this totally different direction. But at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for you. Like it's definitely human nature to have those thoughts, but at the end of the day, you also got to make the best decision for you, and that's going to be the most rewarding and fulfilling for you. Because if you continue down a route that isn't fulfilling you up or giving you purpose, then it's going to end up in a dead end road, like unfulfilled, unhappy, and you're not going to be as successful as you could be if you went the route that did fill you up, that did give you purpose. Because that was, like I said, if there's one thing to take from my story, it was that I needed to find my passion and my purpose. And once I found that, that is when everything started to fall into place.
Yeah, I feel like it was the kind of the same thing for me. Like, and I just really surrounded myself with people like you who were helped me realize that a lot faster and a lot sooner. And so I think it's super important to have like a mentor who is way more successful than you, like exponentially more successful than you. And so talk a little bit about like what was the shift in your practice like whenever you made that switch, like in terms of like success, right? Because everybody says like, oh, you'll be more successful when you're, but like, I mean, I think for you, it's like it's night and day difference. I mean, you probably have one of the biggest practices in the South right now, you know? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess from a standpoint of really kind of finding that fulfillment and I guess I'm kind of what's the question? Can you be a little more specific with
How did
it?
your practice change? Like, cause your practice blew up, right?
Yeah.
After you started with pediatrics, what's the difference in that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the passion and the purpose of, you know, when I was in the upper cervical world, I don't think I had the confidence in my abilities as much. And so because I wasn't as passionate and confident within my abilities, that obviously bled into my patient's confidence into myself. As we know, like our confidence and our belief in what we do is very important for our patients, just from an energetic standpoint. So I think that shift to pediatrics, once I was able to see those amazing changes and I believed it for myself, I think that was really the defining moment when everything took off, is because then I could look a mom in the eye and tell them like, hey, we can help your son or daughter. Versus, you know, if you're looking somebody in the eye and you're not confident that you can help them, like they're going to be able to feel that. And so I think that was a big thing for me, was it really created that confidence that, you know, I'm able to make these changes in these kids. And when I was able to look a parent in the eye and tell them like, hey, this is something that we can help with, that was a defining moment for our practice growth, because then I was able to convert a lot of these to care plans, which, as we know, that's what's really going to get the results in a lot of these cases. So that confidence and the belief in what I do is really the biggest thing that was the catalyst, I would say, to the exponential growth that we were able to achieve.
Yeah, I think going from that, how once you began to grow and really take off, how did you begin to scale and delegate tasks so that you can continue to grow the business and not get stuck in these mundane tasks, if you will?
Yeah, I think that was a difficult part. I would say the leadership and delegation was one of the biggest things that I had to learn. And, you know, I'm still learning with that as we grow and scale our practice. The scaling side of things involves a lot of delegation and leadership. So in the beginning, like I wanted to hold on to doing everything. So when I hired my first associate, I just let her adjust. I did basically everything else and was like, you can adjust and I'll do everything else. And then I still had to adjust on top of that. And so if I was better in the beginning, I would have thrown her into allowing her to do more of the report of findings, the progress report of findings, some of the marketing. Like I was still doing a lot of the stuff, even though I had this associate that I was paying, but she only had really one role. And now, as I've learned through scaling and growth, is you can delegate some of your responsibilities and tasks to your team members. So I think for those just starting to build your team, like you guys, that's one of the biggest things that I recommend is just being okay with giving ownership to your employees and your team members. That's what's going to help them grow as well. And so over the years, you'll realize like the more that you delegate, the more the office is going to grow. And actually, as long as you hire the right people, the more ownership they're going to have as well within their role. When people are given responsibilities and you're delegating some of the tasks to them, they're going to feel more rewarded, I guess, within their work, within the practice, because they're going to feel that trust that you have to give them. So I'd say in the beginning, that's probably one of the hardest things for a lot of people in the beginning as you're growing your team, is that delegation aspect. Is, as the owners, we want to hold on to everything so much. And so we might just give them a little piece of our plate of things to do, but we want to hold on to the rest of them. And so that's the most difficult part, is releasing the reins of the control of the business to be like, hey, actually, we're more powerful as a team if we can divide and conquer all of the roles and responsibilities and tasks. But like I said, that was probably one of the most difficult things for me to learn. But now at my stage now, it's like I'm always thinking, what's the next thing I can get off of my plate? What's the next thing that I can delegate to somebody else? And also develop more leaders within the office as well. That's a big thing that I've learned over the last few years. In the beginning, when I had a smaller team of one associate and a couple CAs, I really didn't divide the leadership up. It was still solely on me. But as we've grown, I've learned to develop the leaders that now, I'm not needed a lot of the times within the practice. And that's something I think I've shared this story with you guys before on some of our calls, but oftentimes our record months are when I'm not there the most. Is like when I take the longest vacations, the team takes more ownership and we have record months when I'm not there. So that's the cool thing as you grow and scale and you're able to delegate to your team. Obviously, like I said, having the right employees is crucial to that. But delegation is probably the hardest thing in the beginning as you're scaling your practice, because it's what you built, especially for those of us that started out as one-man shows. Is we had to do everything. And so thinking of giving some of that responsibility to another person that you might not know right away very well is very, very difficult for a lot of people.
And I think too, I mean, all that is so real, especially being 13 months in. And really two things off that is, for one, there's almost a fear, like I'd much rather me make the mistake than have my team member make the mistake, because I know at least I can go home and kind of live with it. But now it feels like I made two mistakes if the team member makes the mistakes. But coming to learn that, like, as long as we're trying, like, mistakes are going to happen. So whether it's me or the team, we got to get through it. But I also think too, there's that business ownership, like you were talking about with that, when you're first starting out and you're doing everything, there's that big rush of dopamine that I think we all get when we get tasks done. And now I'm trying to, at least for me personally, trying to rework my brain where I get more dopamine when I said, like when Victoria, one of our CAs, asked me to, like, how do I do something? I'd much rather get a dopamine hit when I get to tell her, I don't know, ask Josh, ask our other CA, because he should know how to do that, and vice versa. So trying to rewire my brain to actually work on that delegation has been something I know you've been coaching me on, and has helped a ton. We've had 2 back-to-back great months.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with that is, like, you do get the dopamine hits, but here's the difference is when you're completing all of these different tasks, you're getting that dopamine hit. You're still working in the business. So you're not necessarily working on the business. And that's the biggest shift, is that working in the business is often the biggest energy drain. So when you are completing all of these different tasks within the business, you're actually draining your energy to work on the business. So then when it gets time to work on the business, you've already exerted all of your energy on all of those tasks that you're like, I don't want to work on the business because I'm mentally checked out at this point. I just want to mentally relax, because working on the business takes more thinking than it does doing a lot of the times.
Yeah, it was like this past weekend, at Ryan Ryder's mastermind, he was talking about like the different seats in the business, right? And so all three of us are the visionaries, and our weekly meetings, we do a to do and not done so list where we have different tasks. And it was very freeing hearing him say, the visionary is the only one that's not supposed to have a to-do list, because if the visionary has a to-do list, nothing is actually happening in the business. And I couldn't relate more, because I'm always the one telling my team, oh, I didn't get that done. And it's because I'm over in la la land trying to think of how can we grow this thing. So delegate.
And it's a difficult thing in the beginning. Like, I think as you go on and gain experience, I know it's like year after year after year, I learn more and more of what it means to be that visionary, and what that role really looks like. It becomes clearer and clearer as you get further down the road, because like I said, you're basically going through this metamorphosis and change from doing everything to not doing anything task related, to just guiding the direction of the business, which is a totally drastic change from the beginning of having to do all of the tasks.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really learned this weekend whenever I went hang out with you, is just like, I didn't have anything to do. And I feel like coming back yesterday and being going into the office, like I had the clearest focus that I've had in a long time, is because I was actually able to sit and think, and like of what direction. Before, like, especially as somebody who gets kind of sidetracked, like I just was like, oh, I could do this and I can do that and I can do this and I can do that. And then by the time my mind like bounces around like so many times to these things, I get nothing done. And then you get this like procrastination remorse almost of like, man, like I spent all this time like not moving the needle at all and nothing got done, but I felt like I was working the whole time. So now I'm tired.
Yep.
So yeah. So what is as somebody who is now like mentoring and coaching Zach and I, what are some of the things that you see in the people that you coach that are some of the most like limiting factors for them? And then what are some of the things that you see that like make a difference in people who succeed and who don't?
Yeah, I would say in the beginning, there's a couple different types of people that I've noticed. And, I haven't been doing the coaching too long, but it's been about 6 months, roughly 6 months since I started coaching. But one of the things that I've learned and kind of noticed is there's a couple different types of people. The people in the beginning, they're the people that are overthinking everything. They're in that analysis paralysis. They're actually not doing enough. They're just thinking like, oh, I can do a little bit of this whenever I want. I can do a little bit of this whenever I want, especially from like a marketing perspective, of getting the practice off the ground and trying to, get to a point where the practice is stable enough where you're well over meeting overhead every month. Those people that struggle with the grind of trying to hit overhead all the time, they're not taking consistent enough action in a direction. They're just dabbling a little over here, dabbling a little over here. Whereas if they were to just pick a couple things and focus on those and consistently do that work, that's what's going to grow their practice to a stable point of meeting overhead, where you guys are past that. You've learned that. But now it shifts into, how do we scale and grow this thing, which a lot of the times it's leadership and team. So for that, I would say the biggest struggle is kind of what we talked about, is delegation, is learning to delegate, trust your team, but also learning what is a good employee, what's not a good employee, how do I know if somebody's a culture fit for our office? How do I know what's not? How am I building the culture of the office? That at that stage of your office is the most important piece, is like you're trying to free yourself up as much as possible. Whereas especially at your guys's stage, all your focus right now should really be on, obviously you have to do the patient care side of things. Once you guys, I know over the next year, both of you guys will be hiring associates in the next 6 months to a year. That's what's really going to start to free you up, where you can step back from patient care. And then all of your focus really at that point is going to mainly be on the sales side of things. Are we converting our patients within the sales process? Are we marketing side of things? Are we getting enough leads and new patients coming in? And then the leadership of the team, basically making sure that they're getting the things done that need to get done, and working on the systems, the processes, the operations side of things. So I'd say those are like, especially coaching now over the last 6 months, the two biggest hurdles that I've seen at the different stages. Like I said, initially that analysis paralysis, and then once you kind of get past that meeting overhead stage, then it's really the delegation and the leadership and the growing and scaling the practice, so that you can start to step back and really focus on the vision of things. And then what was the last question in regards
to what are some qualities that you like notice that make a difference in the people who like grow very rapidly and then people who like can't get the practice off of the ground?
I think it's the people that aren't afraid to make mistakes, that, are willing to just act, because that's how we learn. If we don't take any action because we're afraid, or there's a limiting belief there that's holding us back from taking massive action, then that's going to lengthen our learning curve. And so the people that take a lot of action right away, even if they mess up along the way, are the ones that are going to learn the quickest. They're the ones that are going to grow the fastest. And I would say that's the biggest difference, is like that I see in some of the people that I coach, is the ones that are still struggling. They're just not taking enough action. Whereas, like I said, you guys and some of my other clients that have been able to scale over that $20,000 a month to $30,000 to $40,000 a month, you guys already know how to take action. Now it's just figuring out the team side of things, the leadership side of things, and getting things off of your plate so that the office can continue to grow.
You have any things? I got more questions. I can keep going.
Yeah, if you want to keep ripping, go ahead, man.
Yeah. So what are some of those action steps, right, for us to take to develop our leadership and delegation and systems?
I think it's diving into as many books as you can, read as many books on leadership and delegation, listen to as many podcasts on leadership, delegation. I mean, that was my focus, and still is part of my focus, the last few years, 2 to 3 years. And like I said, I'm still growing in this area, and I don't think you're ever done, right? Is because as we level up as leaders, then we're able to hire better leaders and raise up better leaders within our practices as well. So I feel like just diving into learning as much about it as possible, and then trying to apply it. When you read a book, don't just move on to the next book. Take what you learned from that book and start implementing it and putting it into practice. And that's how you really learn and incorporate those things. And then getting involved in as many different things as possible from a leadership standpoint. Like me, being on the board of Delta Sigma Chi got me exposed to like leadership, running meetings and things like that also translate to practice as well. Is like, that's how I learned how to run a meeting within the practice and keep people on task and things like that. So getting involved in any of those organizations on a board level, whether it's your BNI group, being on the board of your BNI group, or your local chamber of commerce, or a business alliance within your area, or the professional organization that you're a part of. All of those things really translate from a leadership standpoint and helping you develop those things.
What is the one most valuable book that you've read that you feel like has had the biggest impact on your practice?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I would say, Traction's a great one, just from an operations leadership standpoint. I feel like Traction is really a foundational one, because it hits on so many different things, like having a weekly meeting and having a protocol and a list of ongoing issues and challenges, and getting those done and checking them off. So I feel like from a standpoint of like, for most practices, if they want to scale as a foundational book, I feel like Traction is like one of those very influential books for helping the practice scale. But then also, like we talked about this, Zach, your father-in-law gifted this book to us, but The Wealthy Gardener, that's been a very influential book in my life of just from a personal development and personal growth standpoint of, getting better in all these different areas as well from a personal development standpoint. So there's so many books, as you see behind me. These are like all the books that I've read over the last few years. And I set a goal a couple years ago to read 2 books a month. And every year I've exceeded that by, probably 5-10 books on top of the 24 books that I set the goal out to read. So as I've been down this journey, I've just tried to consume as much knowledge as I can and learn as much as you go. And then experiences is one of the biggest learning things too. Like I said, is just putting it into play and learning from your mistakes and the adversity that you experience as you're going through practice. I mean, this year's been one of the most challenging and most rewarding in my career as well. As you guys know, we shared a little bit about that with you guys, with my office manager that I just talked about earlier in this podcast, leaving and quitting and putting in her notice, but also that being a catalyst for our office growing exponentially at the same time. So it's like, these adversities and these things you go through are often where you learn the most stuff from as well. Reading a book is great and that can help you learn stuff, but actually going through these things and going through challenges is where you often learn the most, and that is through experience.
And I think one thing you talk a lot about and has become very clear to me as well, and I'm sure for Spencer, is that investment in self, right? So it's one thing to go buy a $20 book, but it's another thing to go join a $2,000, $10,000 mastermind and be around people that are already living that life or pursuing the same vision you are. What have been some of the catalysts in regards to leadership development that you've, other than books that have really taken you to that next level?
Yeah, so being in my groups, I mean, when I was in Epic practice, that helped me tremendously with things with Dr. Tony, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Stamp, Dr. Grinacher, like all of these guys were my mentors and coaches in the beginning stages of things when I didn't really know what I was doing. And now I still have so many of those foundations that I took away from Epic practice that I still utilize in my practice today. And then continuing to learn from Dr. Tony, and I was in the Josh Axe mastermind for a year, and all these different people that are, that's like you said, is learning from people that are at points in practice that are much farther ahead of you that you want to get to eventually, because we've all made mistakes. And that's the biggest thing with mentorship is people, your mentors are going to share their mistakes. So hopefully you don't have to make those same mistakes in practice and you can shortcut your success. Like you guys are light years away ahead of where I was 1 year into practice. And that's the cool thing about the coaching is seeing how quickly you guys have progressed into practice, and still maybe not being where you want to be, but still being light years ahead of a lot of your classmates that you went to school with and things like that. But also where you're going in the future and the potential of where you have to go as well. So just pouring into those mentors and those people that are at stages of their career that are much advanced from where you are, and then learning from their mistakes and their failures so that you hopefully don't have to repeat them.
Mm-hmm. And I know,
I think
one thing I always give Spencer credit for is he's a much better integrator than I am. And so I'm really good at consuming information, and then I'll take about 3 to 6 months to really apply it. And then I'm in this hole of like, crap, maybe I should do that thing that Matt talked about 3 months ago. But it takes that time to get it going.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the beauty too, is with a lot of this, we all have our different strengths. So some things Spencer is going to be more gifted at, some things you're going to be more gifted at, some things I'm going to be more gifted at. We're all going to have our strengths as well. So there's some things that, some of us are going to be better at. And so as you grow and develop in your leadership and things like that, that's another big thing is like a book, Strengths Finder, is, you know, self-awareness is one of the greatest tools to personal development. The more that we know our strengths and what we're good at, the more that we can really maximize our leadership capabilities as well.
I think one of the things that I know at least you and I talk about a lot is putting yourself in circles where or like putting yourself in groups of people where you're like kind of the lowest rung on the ladder, right? Because especially when you take massive action and then you have systems and scaling in place, like your growth is going to be a lot faster than, these people who get stuck behind. And so, like, by no means have Zach and I like made it to the end, but kind of in the startup mode, we're kind of out of the startup mode and now more into the development and scale mode is what we're really looking to focus on. And so those kind of circles really don't serve us anymore because we've kind of climbed the ranks, so now we're really looking for another circle. Can you talk a little bit about like how important that is to be around people who are doing like exponentially more than you?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I took away from when I was in the Axe Mastermind for a year. Josh Axe talked about that all the time. Your circle of people that you hang around are the people that you're going to become the most like. So if you've grown all this way, and the people that you're still hanging around are still at this level of practice that you're way past, like they're going to suck you down, they're going to limit your growth. But if you surround yourself with more people that are at these more advanced stages of practice, then that, as a result of just being around them, is going to help you grow. Because that's the biggest thing that I've learned is like you need to be around people that are going to expand your mind. Like people, and we talked about this, we have a Sarasota Rusty Lavender is like he expands my mind just being around him, because he's there's nothing too big for him, and he's going to dream the biggest possible thing out there, and he's like, I'm going to go get it, I'm going to go make it happen. And so being around people like that expands your mind to what's really possible. When you're with people that are at lower rungs than you, or not thinking the same way, then your mind is not going to expand as much. But when you're surrounding yourself by those people, I would say that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is it's really the expansion of the mind to what's possible that really helps you grow. You're able to realize, it's like, if you're to put it like into monetary context, if you're hanging around people that make $50,000 a year, they're going to think, that group of people is going to think much differently than people that are making $500,000 a year. And that group of people making $500,000 a year are going to think a lot differently than people that are making, $10 million a year. Like, and that's the biggest thing, is getting around those circles of people that can expand your mind to what's really possible out there. That's where a lot of that growth and opportunity is going to come from, that expansion of your mind and being around those people. So that's one of the most important things. I would say that's been one of my focus over the last 2 years, is really just trying to attract and get around those people that are going to help me grow as a person, instead of me pouring into everybody trying to get them up to my level. That's going to suck your energy away, as I'm sure you guys have probably seen with some of your friends that are kind of still stuck at a certain level of practice. So really finding that group that's going to help you grow and help you expand is so important to your personal growth, personal development. And every stage of life, there's going to be people that come and go too. Like, that's one of the things that I've learned is, over the years, there's friends that I've had to cut out of my life because their way of thinking is broken and it doesn't serve me well anymore. That, I have to find a new friend group, and you have to be okay with that. Like, you're going to cut ties with, some of your best friends that you've had over the years, but you're just not, and I'm not saying you have to cut them out completely, but you're not going to be able to spend the same amount of time with them that you did previously, if you want to continue to grow and continue to reach those new levels of success.
Yep. And I think one thing, being around you and Spencer, is, and being around, getting into these bigger groups, is you start to notice the different questions and the responses you get when you tell someone that's way ahead of you, is like, they'll typically, the response I've hear a lot is like, all right, let's figure out how to make that happen, versus in that lower circle or around people that are at the same pace or a little bit behind is like, oh, I tried that for a month, it didn't work, so you shouldn't try it either. And so there's encouragement and then there's discouragement when you're, depending on which level you're at. And that's the biggest takeaway I've had is like being around people, not that just blindly encourage you, but also get behind you with a notepad and pen and start to jam out with you on a brain session.
Yep. And family and those closest to you are often the ones that are the most limiting or negative speak to you. That's one of the things that kind of I've learned as well, is like those closest to you, they might not be able to see as big of a vision as what you have for your life. And so they might be the ones that are saying negative things like, okay, like that's awesome, but, or good luck, or are you sure you want to take that risk, or those type of things. And so sometimes it's those closest to us that we just have to be guarded with our mind and our time around those people.
I think one of the things that I learned the most from Rusty this weekend is the difference, like Zach was saying, like between like encouragement and discouragement, is the people that are going to discourage you whenever you like say like, man, I have this dream or I have this idea. They're like, oh, that would be so cool if that could happen. That would be really cool if that could happen. The people that encourage you say that could totally happen. Like Rusty, yeah, he really does. Like he has no limit. Like we were on this boat this weekend, Zach, fishing, and I was like, man, Rusty, you ever gonna get a boat? He was like, yeah, probably so, but he's like, I'm gonna get a 90-foot Viking, which is a $12 million yacht.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's like, to me, like I was like, man, I've never even fathomed having a yacht, you know. And Rusty is like, yeah, we'll make it happen. So like it really had me give me time thinking, because like I really want to make an investment into some rental properties pretty soon. And I know like Rusty is getting into that too. And he's like, yeah, like just do it. Like Rusty is just that guy. Like we were talking about water filters. He's like, yeah, it's pretty cheap. It's like a $5,000 filter system. I'm like, man, that's crazy for a water filter. Like I got a Brita. I was like, man, I need to step my water filter up, you know, like just because Rusty is just doing so much more than me. And like, so it's really encouraging to hang out with people like that. You know, I feel super fired up after our trip.
Yeah, so important. Well, I gotta get running. I actually got a coaching call right now. So
Well, we apologize. Thank you for taking the time out.
yeah, of course.
Giving our listeners the good stuff. So we appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, appreciate you both, and we'll be chatting soon.
See you, bro.
All right. And that was another episode of the What Now podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Matt Morris really brought the house down, and there's, although it may not seem like actionable things, there's tons that you can take away just from that quick conversation, just to really work on your subconscious and really developing yourself. And that's been one of the biggest takeaways is, you know, you're never at the level that you really want to be at. There's always so much more for you.
I think that a lot of the things that our listeners, you guys that are listening, can really take away from Matt is, one, if you're trying to get started, you need to get started.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I literally, in our conversation, I just changed my phone background for my work focus. It used to be this little picture of this guy pushing a wheelbarrow that says nobody wants to put in the work. And that's the thing that like when I would get super overwhelmed and I would pick up my phone to like try to scroll on social media or something like that and like get lost in this like woe is me dump in practice, I would see this thing and it said nobody wants to put in the work. And it's true. Nobody wants to put in the work. Nobody wants to have to work hard. Nobody wants to, you know, build the bricks. And
we're all looking for the golden
of that
ticket.
stuff. Yeah, we're all looking for the golden goose. And so whenever I would get overwhelmed and I would pick up my phone to quit, you know, it just reminded me nobody wants to. So I just changed it to this guy who's like working a tree, and it just says no one can grow a tree in a moment of passion. And that's one of the calls that I had with another one of my other coaches. Maybe we can get him on too, Simon Floriani, who's been in practice for 30 something plus years and has achieved so much. But he was saying, you know, your practice is not, you don't have to think of your practice as something that you have to toil for. It's not something that you have to do. It's a cow that you get to milk. And it's not going to be done in a day. It's not going to be done in a week. It's not going to be done in a year. But the beautiful thing is that you get to consistently show up, and it always provides. And so that's kind of where my mindset is shifting now. And this next year is like, instead of being like, okay, how can I build this thing? How can I build on this house? How can I add more? How can I do more? It's now going to shift to, how can I get the most out of this? How can I milk the cow, right? How can I continually get more from this, instead of what can I add? What can I do? How do I work harder? What do I continue to do?
Yeah.
So that's been a huge mindset shift.
I think too, going into that, you know, what you remind me of is being excited to go milk the cow, right? Like the farmer, you know, it could be really mundane, it could be boring, right? But I think one thing you and I are both learning is typically when we find our most success is when we're willing to put in the boring work consistently. It's not the crazy workout that's going to get you to your health and wellness goals. It's just showing up consistently in the gym and eating the right food. And it's unfortunately the same thing in business, right? There's no sexy golden ticket that's just waiting out there for you. And so being excited and being grateful that you even get the opportunity to show up and milk the cow is something I'm really trying to work on, is when I get into the office every day, like when I see my sign, like I never want to lose that sense of excitement when I first saw the sign go up over our building, right? I still try to carry that, it's still there. Carry that excitement where it, like Matt was talking about, that passion just overflows into the office.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, that's kind of some thoughts to wrap it up. We would love to continue to talk to you about all these things. So you know where to find us. Hit me and Zach up on the DMs. Thanks so much to everybody who posted us on your Spotify Wrap. That's so cool to see that you guys
that was so cool.
Actually listen to our podcast. Like to see people show like, oh, I listened to Rogan and Andy Frisella and the What Now podcast. Like that's so awesome to see you guys up there. So much gratitude for that. And we're glad that we get to milk this cow that is this podcast as well. Sorry that we, Zach and I both probably got a little overwhelmed at the end of the year with that. And so we haven't been as consistent, but I'm feeling pretty fired up, and I'm excited to bring you some more awesome content to your ears through the podcast to hopefully level up you guys. So if you like our show, give us a shout out and give us a share, save our show, give us a rating, whatever you have to do, just to let other people know about the content that we bring to you guys. It's super valuable to us.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the What Now podcast. Peace out.
Peace.